Welcome back to my channel. Today I have 3 winter decor DIYs to share with you using just 3 colors of paint and supplies from the Dollar Tree. All 3 projects are neutral and can be displayed throughout the winter. So let's get into the tutorials and have some fun crafting. For the first project, I'll be using 3 of these wooden signs from the Dollar Tree. They come with a twine hanger going through 2 holes at one end. I originally covered the holes using some spackle because I was going to attach them in a different way, but I end up drilling a hole in each corner of the signs. I painted each board front and back using just 3 colors, black, white, and gray. And then I sanded all of the edges to give it a rustic look. I distressed each of the signs using mineral chalk paint by Waverly. I tap most of the color off of the brush and lightly go over each of the signs. I wanted to make a rustic let it snow sign, but unfortunately I don't have a Cricut, so I'm going to show you how to make a beautiful sign without one. I printed the phrase "Let It Snow" 3 times using my laser printer. But unfortunately, the cardstock that I used didn't go through the printer well, so I went over each letter with a Sharpie marker to make the letters nice and crisp. I used 2 colors of cardstock around each of these phrases to give them a nice border, using Mod Podge to attach them. I didn't want to remove any of the toner or the Sharpie marker, so I'm just using a paper towel and pressing down lightly to make sure it's attached to the paper. I go over each of the signs using matte Mod Podge to seal it in. To give each sign a little more detail, I spattered them with black paint. Like I mentioned earlier in the video, I did change my mind on how I wanted to attach the signs. Here I glued the signs together on each edge, but I do end up changing that. I embellished the signs by adding some wood snowflakes that I had in my stash. After drilling a hole in each corner of the sign, I used some wire as a hanger for the sign and also to attach the signs together. Wrapping the wire around a paintbrush or a wooden dowel adds a little more detail to the sign and holds them in place. And I added some space between each of the signs. This gives the sign a little movement, and I just like the look of it overall. I thought it would be fun to add some snowballs to the hanger. I had some vase filler from the Dollar Tree and I just painted them white to look like snowballs. They're made of styrofoam, so it's very easy to push a stiff wire through. Here's a look at the finished sign. For project number 2, I'll be using these tabletop signs from the Dollar Tree. I wanted to create a sign using separate wood pieces so that I could display them together or separately. To create a square block, I cut two 3-inch long pieces from one of the signs and glued them together. I cut a second 6-inch long piece from the wood for the second part of the sign. I printed the phrase "Let it snow" and traced the outline of the letters to the wood using carbon paper. I used a Posca paint pen to fill in the letters. After going over each of the letters 2 or 3 times with the paint pen, the letters come out nice and bright. Personally, I prefer how this looks, but I do end up distressing the letters to give them more of a rustic look. Using a fan brush and some watered down white paint, I lightly tap the brush to create some splatters over each of the signs. Unfortunately, I didn't tap light enough and created these bigger blobs of paint. So I highly recommend testing it out first to make sure that you don't have too much paint on the brush before tapping. I used my Posca pen to paint some wood snowflakes for embellishments to my sign. I really like using the paint pen for this because it gives you more control over the paint so that it doesn't run down the sides. I used Fabri-Tac glue to attach the wood snowflakes as well as some smaller plastic snowflakes that I had in my scrapbook stash to the sign. I like how this is looking so far, and I wanted to stop here, but I decided to use some fine grit sanding paper to distress the letters a little bit, giving it a more rustic look. It would have been better if I had decided to distress the letters before attaching the snowflakes to make it easier to sand, but I didn't. So I get as close to the snowflakes as I can. This creates a darker ring around the snowflakes, but that's fine. In my opinion, it just gives the sign a little bit more dimension. Because I wanted to have the option to move these blocks around in different configurations, I thought it would be a good idea to seal the paint using matte Mod Podge. Here's a look at the finished sign. For project number 3, I'll be using these metal letters that I took off of one of the Dollar Tree signs. I'm using Waverly chalk paint in the color crimson, as well as an apple barrel paint in the color barn red. After painting a few of the letters, I decided that it wasn't the shade of red that I was looking for. So I end up adding more of the barn red color to get this darker shade. I'll be using one of the sled signs from the Dollar Tree, and I wanted to cover it with some wood grain paper. Hobby Lobby sells a variety of different colors, and I chose this darker gray. After disassembling the sled, I tore off all of the decorative paper from the front. I'll use Mod Podge to attach the scrapbook paper. Using Mod Podge can be really tricky. You have to work very fast or it will start drying on you. When you're putting Mod Podge on larger surfaces like this, it's better to work in small sections. So what I should have done was apply the Mod Podge to about 1/3 of the sled and then attach the paper, working out the air bubbles. Then I can work on the next third and apply the Mod Podge and the paper and work my way down. Luckily, I was able to attach the paper and work out any air bubbles before the Mod Podge dried. I let the Mod Podge dry completely before I trim off the excess scrapbook paper. I do the same thing for the top piece of the sled. I don't know what that's called, but you use it for steering. I painted the runners of the sled black and used some wood glue to attach it to the sled. To give the letters more dimension, I use a Q-tip to apply some black chalk pastel for shading. I used some white chalk for highlighting, but it didn't have a lot of pigment, and after applying a matte clear coat spray, you could barely see it. You can use Fabri-Tac or hot glue to attach the letters to the sled. Just be very careful when handling the letters because they are very sharp and it's easy to cut your finger. I cut off some smaller pieces from this faux greenery stem to add some embellishment to the sled. To add a pop of color and tie into the colors of the letter, I used some of these frosted berries from Hobby Lobby. I tried using Fabri-Tac glue to attach the greenery, but it didn't attach fully, so I ended up using some hot glue. I used some thin black ribbon to make a fast and easy bow. I cut out 4 pieces in a mitten shape using one of the scarves from the Dollar Tree. I glued them together and added just a little bit of stuffing in between, and then I cut some trim using one of the white towels that you can find in the auto section of the Dollar Tree. To add a little embellishment to the mittens, I painted some of these small beads and I'll attach them to this bow that I made out of crochet thread. This was a quick and easy embellishment that adds a lot of charm to the mittens. I used some of those wooden snowflakes to embellish the sled. I cut a long piece of that thin ribbon and folded it in half to use as the hanger for my sled. Here's a look at the final project. I hope you enjoyed these winter decor tutorials. If so, I would really appreciate it if you give this video a thumbs up. And if you're new to my channel, I hope you'll hit the subscribe button.